everybody, I'm Kevin Sander. I'm the Programme Director for SSB Finance and Procurement, and the purpose of this short video is just to talk to you a bit about project accounting and how that's going to feel different and better in our new Agresso world. So this first slide is very wordy, sorry about that. If you want to read the detail, you can download it from our wiki site. But actually now I'm just going to talk to you about 2 or 3 key areas of functionality that are going to feel different and much better once we move to tracking our project finances in Agresso. So the first area I'd like to talk about is project planning and forecasting and budgeting. Currently the project planning process is all done off system in big spreadsheets. Previously the project planning workbook. This year we're using a different version of that called the RAP. The good news is in the new world, once we're onto Agresso, all of that stuff will be supported by a central finance system, so we'll eliminate the need for those separate spreadsheets. We'll be able to build up the 3-year view of our project pipeline right in the system, and in fact we're building it so that we can go up to 10 years in the future if we get to a point where we want to do that. Or it'll be good to be able to catch all of that in the system. As part of that planning and moving from planning through into project budgeting, when we then start to build up a detailed budget for each project, in the system we'll be able to create that month-on-month view of cost and income for each project if relevant, and build all of that up right there as well, again replacing spreadsheets that a lot of project managers and project coordinators have to run at the moment to try and build all of that information. One of the nice side effects of having that in the system is that if there's a delay in starting a project, so it might have been planned initially to start in month 3, it's going to move out and not start till month 6, rather than reworking all of that in spreadsheets and so on, it's just a couple of keystrokes and the system will lift and shift the monthly profile that we've built and reposition it, not just for the current financial year, but across the whole project life. So that's the other key difference in terms of project planning and budgeting and forecasting, is that people doing that within Agresso will be able to do it on a whole life basis for each project. Have to be so concerned with tracking stuff artificially by financial year. The system will just take care of all of that in the background, and as things move around from one month to another, it will work out which financial year they belong to and what the impact of that is. That will also mean that we eliminate the need to do that whole manual carry forward exercise as part of the year-end close process, because again the system will just take care of all of that for us. So what that means is that project managers and coordinators will be able to track, report and forecast all project activity within Agresso, just replacing a whole bunch of spreadsheets that we need to rely on at the moment. Second area that I want to talk about is project funding and linkage in with the funds ledger. So that's described on the slide here as a bit of a black art. At the moment, the funds ledger bit and the project ledger bit of Aptos are quite separate. In fact, they get linked up between those 2 bits of Aptos by a big spreadsheet that we use to manage all of the project reservations and project approvals. It's not the best way of doing it. We survive with it, but sometimes it does get a bit confused and a bit broken. What that means also is that because there's that spreadsheet link in the middle, the funds drawdown process, where we take money from a fund and use it to offset spend against a project, is also very manual. And when we bring all of that together in the real world at the moment, that means that the funds drawdown is often, as a large manual exercise, only done by finance business partners at year end. And when they go to draw funds down at year end to cover your project spend, often what happens, unfortunately, is they'll think that there's been some funds reserved for your project, but actually because the spreadsheet's got itself into a bit of a pickle, those funds have in fact been used already on another project, and then there's a bit of a year-end scramble to go and find alternative funds that can be used to cover off what you've spent during the course of the year. All of that goes away because in Agresso, the funds ledger bit and the project ledger bit will be well integrated, and as we build our project structures, which I'll come on to in a moment, we'll link those funds in directly, and once funds are reserved or approved for your project, we can't lose sight of that. The system again will just manage all of that for us. Last area I'll talk about is grant claiming. So again, that grants that fund projects are also something which are currently tracked manually, another big exercise on spreadsheets, and a grants database that sits alongside Aptos, the current finance system. What that means is that often grant monies aren't really claimed in a timely way, and sometimes they're even forgotten about, which is a real shame. That's just cash that we're missing out on as an organisation. So in Agresso, we can can track for each project spend that should be grant funded. We'll have complete visibility via inquiry and reporting in the system as to how much we have spent that can be grant claimed, and therefore we can be very in control and aware of when we reach a point in time during the project spend where we should trigger a grant claim process. For simpler grants, where we can just send an invoice to the grant provider and say, yeah, we've spent that money, now can you reimburse us please? We can even set Agresso up to automatically issue those invoices on a monthly, quarterly basis, whatever time period is right. For more complex grants where we have to trigger a claim process and jump through a few hoops, provide lots of supporting documentation, perhaps go and have meetings, obviously the system won't replace all of that, but it will give us the visibility of what's building up there ready to be claimed, so we know when is the right time to trigger that more complicated claim process. The other thing I'll just say about everything that we're doing in terms of functionality in Agresso to support project accounting is that we're working with the Project Support Office to make sure that it matches and strengthens and enables the project management framework, including, for example, generating project highlight reports. So the system won't have all the information it needs to generate a complete highlight report, but what it will be able to do is to generate the report template with all of the financial information for your project pre-populated, and some areas where you can then just go in and add commentary. So hopefully that will make things much easier for people in the future as well. So lots and lots of good new functionality coming for people involved in managing and tracking and reporting on project and financial information for projects. That's all driven, though, by this thing I mentioned before called project structures. So what are project structures? Essentially, nothing more than a unique ID for each project. That's no great surprise. And then a bunch of things that we call work orders underneath each project. I'll explain those in a minute. And then various projects can also be grouped into programs. So the work order example shown on the screen is just 7 work orders effectively representing the different stages of the project management framework. In fact, work orders are effectively just buckets within a project. So buckets where we can put different types of cost or different types of income that we want to track within a project, the sort of thing that you would be analysing out now in multiple different lines on a spreadsheet, for example. They are effectively the equivalent of the element in the current project code in Aptos. So the very first part of the project code, if you're familiar with that, is a bunch of letters and numbers that signify the project, and then the last 2 numbers, which are often just 00, are the element. Some projects in Aptos have multiple elements, a 01, a 02, a 03, if people have set codes up to track different bits of a project. But by far and away, the bulk of our projects just have that element set as 00. So it's something that we don't really take much advantage of at the moment. In fact, in Aptos, it's just for reporting purposes, but in Agresso, the project structure, the analysis of work orders within a project, some of you may be familiar with the term work breakdown structure. It's effectively that work breakdown structure within a project. Those work orders will drive a lot of the new functionality that I was talking about before. So it will be worth us investing a bit more time in Agresso around project work orders and project structures to enable all of that functionality. So the sort of things that we would want to create work orders to drive could be where we want to delegate budget ownership within a project to a number of different people, so they would get their own work order with a bit of the budget for that particular stage of the project. Where we want to automate creation of tangible assets, if we're, for example, building a new visitor centre, and we may need to create a number of assets, one for the building, one for the landscaping, one for the kitchen fit out. Within the implementation stage of the project, they would be 3 separate work orders, because there's a one-to-one relationship between the work order and the tangible asset that will then get automatically created in the Agresso fixed asset register. Another manual process that goes away. Also, if we want to link bits of spend in our project back to specific restricted funds. So I talked before on the first slide about how we'll have much better linkage between individual funds and our projects. If, for example, we've got a project to build or to install 10 benches in a bluebell wood, and 9 of those are going to be blue benches and one's going to be a red bench, and we have a specific fund which is just for installing red benches and bluebell woods, then we'd create a work order for that one red bench bit of the project and link it to that fund, and the 9 blue benches for the bluebell wood could be in a different work order linked to a different fund. We could also use the project work orders to automate the claiming of grants that I mentioned before. So all of those sorts of things are reasons why we're going to create more complex project work order structures. So in many cases, though, the project structures can be very, very simple. So at a minimum, we can just have one project and one work order. That's all that Agresso needs to function. And we would only create more complex project structures or work order structures for a project where there's a need. So what we're looking to do over the summer is to set up some working groups and let them road test a variety of different real-life projects that we've got ongoing at the moment in our sandpit environment with project structures. And we'll use the output from those working groups to give everyone who will need to be putting together project structures to use in Agresso some really good, clear advice and guidance on what to consider when you build up your project structure to enable all of the new functionality that we'll be providing. We will also work with the output from those working groups to consider what I'm calling the how far and how fast question. So that's how many of these project structures do we need to have in place for go live, and when is the right timing for us to consider creating them all. So it feels like it could be a reasonably big exercise to create project structures. As I said, we don't have to have them all fully developed. We could go live just with one project and one work order for every project that we've got, and that would largely match and replace what we've got in terms of project coding in Aptos at the moment. And then it could be an area of functionality that we'll grow into. So there'll be more information coming out over the next few weeks around the timeline or roadmap that we think we will follow as in terms of creating project structures. It feels like it's potentially a bit of a big lever that we can pull to depressurize things as we head into the really busy autumn period, which I know some of you are referring to as the autumn overload period. And if we can use this to use our approach to a project roadmap and timing of creation of project structures to depressurize things for you during that really busy period, then of course we will. So I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, then talk to your GM or your line manager, or of course contact your Sprite or someone in their regional team. Thanks very much for your time.